Electronic media that have the ability to arouse emotions so powerfully that they can cause someone who has already been paranoid, depressed, a loner, blaming other people for all the problems in his life, say to himself, yeah, that guy's just like me. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to kill more than he did. People are going to remember who I am. Now, of the 10 people watching the coverage who felt that way, only one of them will do it tomorrow. But that's one more than would have happened had there not been that coverage.
Hello, everyone. I wanted to address the news coverage of the shooting that occurred in Florida earlier this week. And I wanted to start with this little clip that I found by this gentleman, Park Dietz, who is a forensic or a criminal expert, I believe. But I'm going to show another clip of his in a little bit in some context. But basically, around the issue of around media coverage for this type of tragedy. We have a long history now of our media acting more like the rubbernecker at a car accident for a lot of its news, and its responsibility in covering the news is being shirked because of it. And I wanted to show you a couple of video clips to sort of illustrate some thoughts where I'm getting my ideas on this issue. So that was a nice little introduction, but I want to show you this clip from a show called Newswipe. Now, those who may not be familiar with Newswipe would more likely be familiar with the guy who created it and the guy who's going to be speaking, called Charlie Brooker, for his very successful Netflix show Black Mirror. But before Black Mirror, Mr. Brooker made a series of documentaries, first on a show called Screenwipe, which was a sort of a meta-analysis of video production in general, which is a fantastic series if you're able to find it. I'm sure some of the episodes at least are on YouTube. But then he followed it up with this series called Newswipe, which was similar to Screenwipe, but focused specifically on news video coverage and news production. This is it was a two-series show, so there were 2 seasons in North American parlance. And then there were a number of annual specials that he's done, which he may still be doing. I haven't actually checked in a while. But the 2 series that he does has many of these really interesting segments that are really highlighting issues with news coverage. And the very first episode of his show, the last segment on the episode, is specifically addressing mass shootings and media coverage of such events, and just media coverage of tragedies in general, and how it can dominate the cycle and also perpetuate many of the same crimes that it's covering. So let me play this video, and then I'll stop it at one point, because there's a point I want to make that he doesn't really cover, but let's play it and we'll come back.
You know, when I suggested doing this Screenwipe current affairs spin-off type show, I thought it would be a good exercise in self-improvement. But in fact, all it's done is depress me because the news is so horrible.
We believe from what the police officer was telling us that he killed his 74-year-old grandmother, also his mother, his uncle, his cousin, his 15-year-old second cousin. In addition, he killed a baby, he killed a sheriff deputy's wife, he killed 2 pedestrians, he killed a petrol station assistant, he killed a motorist, he let loose 7 rounds at a trooper, he shot the chief of police, and he shot himself. I will let you digest that for a moment.
Which isn't to say the world itself is horrible. I mean, it's still full of sunshine and flowers and cuddly creatures you'd like to have sex with, like this rabbit. Oh, look at that rabbit. Anyway, I guess what I'm saying is there's generally more good than bad in the world, unless you're watching the news, which likes to accentuate the negative at every turn.
For instance, a few weeks ago at a homecoming parade for our boys, a small group of 15 to 20 Islamist protesters kicked up a stink by wobbling a load of antagonistic placards around and loudly decrying Western imperialism from behind a line of Western imperialists defending their right to shout about the system that was permitting them to shout.
If you see what I mean.
Predictably, the protest outraged some well-wishers so much things quickly turned ugly. Before long, 2 people were arrested, one for climbing on top of a supermarket and throwing a packet of bacon at the protesters.
So a tiny minority of another minority tried to stir up some outrage, and there's 2 arrests. Not a huge deal. Except the news thought differently, of course.
To the news, it was a huge deal. It provided dramatic material for news bulletins, fantastic emotive copy for populist tabloid headlines, and a great starting point for countless hours of confused debate on shows like Banal Morning, Guffstorm, The Right Stuff.
Steve, what's your feelings on this?
Well, I totally think it's bad that they tried to protest and basically...
And shorter bursts of simplistic yes-no debate on decisive Sky News.
Hello? Yes, I think probably... Hello?
Meanwhile, radical cleric Anjem Chowdhury, who heads the group that arranged the protest, was all over cosy GMTV, enjoying the publicity and their comfy sofa.
And the reality is, you see, that if we had this demonstration at another time, when the parade was not taking place, it probably wouldn't have got the coverage that it's got, and I wouldn't be here now talking about it on your programme.
You've certainly got us all going this morning. There's been a lot of dialogue, and dialogue has to be considered a good thing, I guess. Thank you very much.
It's good that you can come and talk to us about it.
Yes, thanks, Anjem.
So I just wanted to pause there for a second. That he pointed out that media is predictable, and this gentleman who was on the interview that we just saw specifically organized the protest to manipulate the media to raise his visibility and raise their voices' visibility, and media needs to be smarter than this. It needs to be more intelligent about not just what it's covering, but how it's covering it, and in what proportion it's covering a lot of competing stories on the news day. Because especially if you're dealing with national news and even more especially global news, you only have so much time in a day when you're doing a live channel. If you're doing live news, you're limited by the amount of time that you've got. So you have to be selective, and the focus should be for getting the most important stories to the forefront and spending the majority of the time covering them. But instead what we get is the news coverage is being pushed towards the stuff that's the most salacious, the stuff that's going to get the most eyeballs, that's going to get the most people interested. Because, the big stories aren't going to be these high drama moments most of the time, because they're complex and you need analysis and you need rational thinking. You can't just consume and get a feeling for what a story, the really most complex issues that we face in a short 30-second, 1-minute clip. It has to be, you have to give it 5-10 minutes to breathe, if not half an hour or an hour. Let's continue on here and I'll come back to this point.
Now, would you like an infidel biscuit? They're lovely.
There was also another parade scheduled to take place that day, which the news excitedly cut to.
But wouldn't you know it, when the moment of truth came, the Watford March passed off without incident and the news was left without the story.
Parades. Let's have a listen to see what's going on down there in Watford.
No, nobody shouting baby killers. This is boring. Fuck it.
Still, while there wasn't even the tiniest protest in Watford, there was a huge protest taking place in Northern Ireland, where thousands of demonstrators were taking to the streets in the name of peace.
Yes, that's thousands of protesters coming together to demonstrate against the recent upsurge in Republican violence. So surely if 15 to 20 protesters in Luton gets a lot of coverage, surely thousands of protesters in Northern Ireland is going to get even more, right? Wrong.
Tonight at 10, a mass shooting at a school in Germany leaves 16 people dead.
Yes, because on the same day as the peace demonstration, a lone maniac in Germany went berserk with a gun, killing 16 people. This senseless tragedy provided material for news reports for days to follow. First, there were the initial dramatic breakdowns detailing precisely how the carnage unfolded. There was grim voyeuristic mobile phone footage of the gunman's last moments, and a chilling reconstruction of a warning he apparently posted on the internet.
He typed these words: "Everybody's laughing at me. No one sees my potential. I'm serious."
Which later turned out to be almost certainly false, incidentally.
The aftermath in Vinnerton proved so compelling for the vulture-like rolling news stations they even filled airtime showing things that weren't happening yet.
2 days later, even footage from an old ping-pong tournament in which the back of the gunman's head was vaguely visible was still considered news.
The latest pictures of Kretschmer show him playing table tennis, his favourite sport.
And 3 days later, even worse footage, pixelated to the point where it looked like a broadcast from the Lego dimension, well, that was considered news too.
In the video, Kretschmer is shown taking part in an arm wrestling contest in Rothenburg last year.
Yeah, I think if I squint, I can just about make out the face of a killer. Isn't the news brilliant? Repeatedly showing us a killer's face isn't news, it's just rubbernecking. And what's more, this sort of coverage only serves to turn this murdering little twat into a sort of nihilistic pin-up boy.
One thing the news kept plaintively asking was why this had happened.
Why? What had triggered in the mind of a seemingly normal teenager such fury and alienation?
Well, if you want to know why not ask a forensic psychiatrist?
We've had 20 years of mass murders, throughout which I have repeatedly told CNN and our other media, if you don't want to propagate more mass murders, don't start the story with sirens blaring.
The school day had only just begun when the attacker struck.
Don't have photographs of the killer.
The 17-year-old's 3-hour rampage ended in his own death.
Don't make this 24/7 coverage.
The German Chancellor is about to give her reaction. We'll bring that to you live.
Do everything you can not to make the body count the lead story.
Carnage in the classroom, 16 people are dead.
Not to make the killer some kind of anti-hero.
Dressed in black combat gear, the gunman opened fire at random.
Do localize this story to the affected community and make it as boring as possible in every other market. Because every time we have intense saturation coverage of a mass murder, we expect to see 1 or 2 more within a week.
But I mean, hold on a second here.
Sorry, and that's the other point I wanted to stop there because he'll gloss over this. When the news covers issues like mass shootings, especially in the way this gentleman just outlined, the things you weren't supposed to do, and again in the clip that I showed at the start of this little video, you're creating and you're planting the idea in someone's head, somewhere in your viewing audience, that has the same sort of issues that the person who propagated the first shooting, and can cause them to act. And as he said, within the next week or two. And when this cycle starts to perpetuate itself, because then you cover that shooting and that promotes other people, and you get into this vicious cycle of shootings and starings and shootings and media starings and shootings, and it's just, and that's where we're in. We're in this now. And it has to stop. Otherwise, the shootings won't stop. And instead we get coverage around things like gun control, which is true. There do need to be, there are improvements that could be made, but that's not, and it's responsible for the first shooting, but in many ways, the media it shares some culpability in the shootings that follow. And that should sound horrifying to both the media organizations and to the public in general, because it is. Anyway, let's finish this off and I'll keep going.
Then not only does bad news always trump good news, but that bad news might itself actually help create more bad news, which is good news if you're the news.
All right, so just that last landing point there. That is there's a reason. The main reason why this happens is because this type of news story is very attractive to news corporations, because it attracts eyeballs, and eyeballs means better ratings, which means better ad revenue, which means more money for the bottom line. So it's not a and that's the primary driver for why it's being covered in the first place. I mean, the news has become something that is viewed as a currency, as something to be commercialized, commoditized, turned into a business venture. Then you get these distortions of what the intention of news is, to the point that it starts to perpetuate the same, the problems that it's reporting on, and that's not a good situation. So that all said, I wanted to spend a few minutes just at the end of this video going over how the North American news audience is covering this story. Before I get to I think I'll play this. This is the first CBC reporting video that I could find about the shooting. So this is how CBC starts breaking the story to its audience about what the issue is. I haven't watched this yet. I'm going to watch it clean. Before we get to that, let me just kind of go through the different channels here. So CBC The National. So you can see there is, this would have been, on the day that it broke, I guess, or was it the day? Yeah. So there's a couple stories that it was covered, but I mean, this took up a big chunk of the national news, and but let's go to the really egregious ones, which would be the American ones. Let me see. MSNBC, what I was looking at, was really particularly bad. So if you look at, go to MSNBC's YouTube channel, go to the videos and just look at the stuff that's been posted in the last couple of days. So there's the second story is about the shooting or related to the shooting. It's gun control. There's a shooting video. There's shooting. Let's see. It gets even worse down here. Yeah, so shooting. Like I said, it just goes on and on and on. More shooting. So MSNBC's been covering this story 24/7, which is exactly what that guy said not to do. You by making this such a big story, you're laying down the narrative that if you're disturbed and you want to go out in a blaze of glory, this is how you do it. You will get coverage around, you'll be world famous, and your life will be dissected, your family will be interviewed, everyone will be talking about you for days, if not weeks ahead. Although at this point, because there's so many shootings that are happening in the States, it's probably closer to days. Because something else will come along and distract. But it's the same, and again, the same coverage. You get the same stories getting covered. Gun control. This is a story that's not going anywhere, certainly not with the government that's in power in the States right now. And yet, that's what the liberal media is covering in the States, is they're not solving a problem, they're perpetuating it. And same thing, I'm guessing NBC, I haven't been here, but let's just scroll down. There's shooting. Like it's I think shooting. CBS. Let's go down to the day where it would have happened. Oh, actually, so CBS just doesn't post new video because that's the only. The only video they've posted in the last week is on the shooting. ABC News. Shooting, what triggered the suspect for shooter? See, again, this is the getting into the person here, showing some. I don't know, that's Roseanne. But there you go, school shooting survivors, showing kids that were survivors. It's all about just exploiting the story to get eyeballs on screen, and it's rubbernecking. It's not news, and it shouldn't be covered on a national scale. It should be covered like that professional Mr. Dietz said. So it should be local coverage. But given the facts that are important to the local area, but for everybody else, it should not be covered. It should be covered as blandly. Just say there was a shooting. Don't even say the number that were killed. Don't identify the individual, and just move on, because it's not news. There's nothing newsworthy here. There's nothing that's important for you to be informed about. It's just gossip. So, anyway, I could do this for some of the other channels. I imagine it's the same again for... Fox News actually is slightly different. Here's the Fox News channel. In that, of course, them being very pro-guns and very much the people that are that are responsible for creating the content on Fox News are very much in the same pocket as the people who are, funding the NRA and making sure that gun control doesn't happen. And so you get some stories where they're talking about they'll cover things like media rush to link school shooter to white nationalist group. Again, how to address the school security problem. They reframe the conversation in a different way, but it shouldn't even be covered. It's not news. Okay, I'm just going to finish this off with the CBC one and see if I can, let's see, here it is. I'm going to just play this and just sort of give a little bit of, it's only 3 minutes, so just kind of curious to see how CBC's covering this story at the start. See how many of the rules that the guy just laid out, if they break any of them. So which would be, does it start with sirens? Does it show pictures of the killer or give information about him, really? Does it talk about how many are dead? Was kind of curious to see.
Now to a developing story that we're tracking in Florida. A shooter has opened fire at a high school. There are reports of multiple fatalities. The CBC's Natasha Fatah is here with the latest. What do we know so far, Natasha?
We have confirmation from the police, Terry, that there are at least 14 victims as a result of this mass shooting that took place earlier in the afternoon at a Florida high school. Now, this is in Parkland.
Okay, so we've already got the number of deaths down. Now we're going to go into the detail
Florida,
where it is.
and the high school in question is the Stoneman Douglas High School. Now, they in fact said that there was a mass casualty incident which led the local media to report that there were at least 20 people injured. So we don't have official confirmation on that. The police are saying at least 14 victims.
So now we're getting lots of spectator gawking footage, just rubbernecking, it's all it is.
The important thing to note also is that the suspect in this situation has been taken into police custody. Earlier, there were images emerging of a man in a burgundy sweater being put into a police car and then later being put into a gurney taken to hospital. We don't know if that is in fact the suspect, but that is a person that was put in the back of a police car and then later transported to hospital. So we continue to follow that part of the story. Now, beyond that, it's been a terrifying afternoon at this local high school where we understand.
Okay, so really, I mean, that really should have been the extent of the national story. A brief highlight of the information, where it happened, what's the current situation, and really that's really all that's important. The rest of this isn't going to be particularly useful to you as far as being informed, other than, like I said, just morbid curiosity.
And about 3,000 students were in attendance at the time, many of them in and around the hallways, in the classrooms, when multiple students said they were hearing gunshots taking place. Some of them were able to record at least the audio of the gunshots as they were trying to hide under their desks, hide and barricade themselves behind their...
So I'm assuming that audio got picked up by some news organization and broadcast at some point too. Again, I have avoided all coverage on this matter because I don't view it as news, so I actually don't know any of the details of this story, and I'm trying to keep myself as blissfully unaware as possible, but again, this is part of this exercise, just to see exactly how the CBC views the matter.
Their desks in their classrooms. We know the high school was placed under lockdown, but we also know a neighboring middle school was placed into lockdown, and terrified parents from right across the county came, but they could only come about a mile's distance away from the school because the police...
So again, now we've got people were terrorized. It's the language that's being used, right? It's about sensationalizing the issue, making you so, oh my God, people were terrified, the world's in panic. It's not news.
Police had put up a large perimeter. We counted initially a couple of hours ago at least 45 police cars. Multiple police units were at the scene trying to figure out just exactly what had taken place. So this is being described by one of the local papers as an American nightmare unfolding in the middle of this Wednesday.
So again, more hyperbolic language. American nightmare. That would be a good headline on a newspaper that's also not doing its job.
Afternoon. Again, very few details in terms of the motive behind this. There are now reports emerging that, in fact, the shooter was a former student at the high school. So
So now we're going to start to get the details. Yeah, all right.
Waiting to get official confirmation on that. It seems that one of the representatives from the county's office might have said that, but they believe it's an 18-year-old male and possibly a former student. We're waiting for further clarification on that. At least 14 victims. That number could go up. There have been reports of multiple fatalities, but again, that is coming from politicians and other people who are in and around the scene, not specifically from the police or from a hospital. So still lots of details to clarify for you, Terry. We'll continue to do that.
Great, thanks you. Thanks. Natasha Fatah in Toronto. Appreciate this very much.
You're welcome.
Right. So that was how they broke the news. Let's go see how they covered it in the follow-up story. There's an update story here. Here's the update story. Oh, it's a 30-minute update. Well, there you go. So the next video is actually the guy's name. I'm not going to even say it or highlight the video, but there he is right front and center. Not needed, not important, shouldn't be on there. Let's go to the update, and it's just, I'm not going to watch the 30 minutes of it, but let's just see what they say as well. Do they do sirens? Are we getting sirens?
Daunting and
nope.
challenging.
Oh, you got a law enforcement,
but it
though.
had to be done. It was the right thing to do, and they worked tirelessly. This community is hurting right now. There's going to be a lot of conversations over the next couple of days and weeks, and I'm going to be very animated about what I think this country can do.
So, good story for the local news, not relevant for the national news. Yeah, I don't even know if this is a lot of interview of him. There's some other people, talking heads. What else is here? Alright, so this isn't the proper news. This is just a camera sitting down and a bunch of people doing a press conference. Let's skip this one. That's not really what I'm looking for. But again, not particularly useful. Let's go back. So, yeah, at least CBC isn't wall-to-wall on their YouTube channel anyway. I would be kind of curious to see what CBC News Network is doing, but of course they don't stream on YouTube. Taxpayer company, taxpayer organization not doing a job being transparent. It's another issue, but we do see some of the other videos here, such as Florida high school attack. Is there a way forward? Probably not. Again, I don't know. I guess I'm kind of running out of steam on this issue. I'm not going to go any further on it, but though I made my points that I wanted to make. Can we just stop doing this coverage? Can we stop being complicit in the creation of these stories that are happening on a regular basis, weekly basis these days in the States? All right. Well, better news to follow. Sorry about this, but I had to get it off my chest. Hope you found this useful. Thanks.